Hey, everybody. I want to just quickly go over the work that we did on Monday over the daily life in the Roman Empire, where you read the sections and you completed the Venn diagrams. I want to go over pages 1 through 3 in your notes. So make sure you have those open and that you check your answers as we go along. So the first thing I want to talk about is the forum. And in the introduction, it mentioned that the forum is the center of the most important public activities in the city of Rome and the Roman Empire. So the forum is the center of the city of Rome. And because the city of Rome is at the center of the empire, it is where the important activities of the empire happen as well at the forum. The forum, if you were to visit the forum, you would see shops and markets set up for people to buy and sell goods. You would see government buildings that surround the forum. The Senate would meet in the forum. You located right here above the forum is the Temple of Jupiter. Jupiter is the ruler of the Roman gods, like what Zeus was for the Greeks. So there would be a temple above the forum, and there would be also other temples above the forum as well. When you enter the forum, or the center of the public activity in Rome, you would see both plebeians and patricians. You would see men, women, and children. And you'd also see slaves. In the forum, you would also see foreigners who came to visit the city of Rome from Britain and Spain and North Africa and Egypt and Asia. Okay, so the forum was the center of Rome, the city of Rome, and its activities. I just want to go over that idea quickly. So the section 1 was just a simple overview of the differences between the rich Romans, the patricians, and the poor Romans, the plebeians. So the rich Romans bought luxury items that came from around the empire. They could afford to buy the more luxury items, such as silks, jeweled weapons, perfumes, musical instruments, things that came from places like China or India or Africa or Gaul, for example. These kind of luxury foreign items they were able to buy from the merchants. The rich Romans also decorated their houses with statues and fountains. Because they had the extra wealth, they could create these large, fancy homes with realistic statues and water fountains and things like that. The poor Romans, on the other hand, lived in very dangerous apartments. If you would have walked in a poor Roman neighborhood, it would be filthy. It would smell. There would be disease. And there would be also high crime. And we'll talk about why there was high crime in a few moments, but there was high crime. So very dangerous apartments. Also, the apartments had a lot of people inside of them, and they were made of wood. So they could easily be caught on fire as well. And poor Romans, the majority of the plebeians, the poor Romans, actually lived in the countryside. And either they owned or worked on small farms in the countryside, or they worked on estates owned by the rich. So they either worked on their own small farms or on the larger farms of the rich. So that's a little bit of the rich and poor comparison. All right, so make sure you check your answers. They don't have to be exactly like mine, but make sure that you that they are comparing and contrasting the rich and the poor. So section 2 talked about law and order. And no, it's not talking about the law and order that we see on TV, even though it's the same concept. Law and order is the idea that people should live according to a set of agreed upon laws, that every person should live by an agreed set law code. And we learned in previous lessons that in ancient Rome, they were the 12 tables, right? As the empire continued to grow, one Roman judge was quoted in saying, "Whatever pleases the empire is the law." So the emperor eventually became the source of law. But that doesn't change the fact that the Romans believed in law and order, that there should be a strict set of laws. Roman law was very strict. Crime was extremely high in Rome. Some poor sections of Rome were closed at night because the crime rate was so high and dangerous. So they needed strict laws and an order, which means punishments as well. So the rich Romans were treated more leniently by the law, which means that they were that they were treated with more grace. They had more leeway in the law. They weren't punished as severely as the poor Romans. The rich also had their neighborhoods patrolled by police. So police were seen quite frequently in these neighborhoods that the wealthy lived in. The poor Romans suffered harsher punishments for crime. The poor Romans also lived in dangerous neighborhoods, as I mentioned, right? The police really never patrolled their neighborhoods. They weren't active in there. So there was a very high crime rate. All Romans, and this is what all of them could do, they could accuse someone of a crime. So the poor could accuse the rich could accuse the poor could accuse the poor, the rich could accuse the rich. Anybody could be accused of a crime or accuse someone of a crime. And a jury would decide the case, as we talked about in a previous lesson about the jury, that a group of Roman citizens would decide innocent or guilty. And the law applied to all citizens. So the set law code applied to every single citizen. That's what they had in common. The next one is religion. So section 3 is religion. Remember, I said this one is all Romans. The rich and the poor did the same religious practices. So Roman religion adopted many Greek gods and goddesses. So they took the ideas of the Greek religion, mythology, and they kind of just changed it to fit Roman way of life. But some of them say the same or the exact same. So Zeus in Greece became Jupiter. So the ruler of the gods in Rome was Jupiter. You had Aphrodite became Venus, the god of love. You had Hermes became Mercury. Apollo was Apollo. Ares was Mars. And so they adopted many of the gods and their concepts. They made offerings and sacrifices to please the gods or ask for help. They did this in temples. There were many temples in Rome and throughout the Roman Empire. And so they made these sacrifices where they would bring gifts to the gods and food. They would sacrifice animals just to help hopefully please the gods, because they believed, as well as the Greeks, that the gods controlled every aspect of life. So here's the temple of Jupiter that was in Rome. They celebrated festivals and holidays. And they also honored the emperors as gods. So eventually the emperors were honored as if they were gods. So section 4 is about family life in Rome. The rich men held political positions and provided for the family. So in patrician families, usually the men provided for the family. Actually, all the time, the men provided for the family. They could hold those political positions. Women ran the household and trained slaves. For the poor, the plebeians, both the husband and wife had to work to provide for the family. All Romans, they believed in the idea of paterfamilias, which is the idea that the oldest male of the Roman household was in charge. So the oldest male of the family, and what he said was law for the family. So no one could go against what the oldest male said. The oldest male was also responsible of picking a spouse for their children, especially the women were chosen. Their husbands were chosen for them by the oldest male. And also family members could be punished for not listening to the oldest male. That's paterfamilias. Only Romans, both poor and rich, only kept babies that were healthy. That should be healthy on the screen. So they only kept the babies that were healthy. They got rid of or killed the babies that were sick. They only kept healthy babies. They held ceremonies to celebrate a boy becoming a man and getting married. They held these celebrations. And one of the reasons that the celebration of a boy happened is for poor Romans, particularly, children only lived, they were lucky to get past the age of 10. So for them to get to this adulthood was a great celebration. All right, so here's just an artwork, a portrait of an emperor and his family. And here is a statue of a Roman wedding. So food and drink. All of the Romans, I'm going to start with all first, in case I don't get through it all. All of the Romans, there was these fast food places, and I'm going to put this in parentheses, called Thermopylae. Thermopylae was a fast food place, and it's where Romans could go for fast, convenient, hot food. And this is what they look like. All right, this is the remains of a Thermopylae today. And this is what it would have looked like in ancient Rome. All right, very busy, where it was a convenient place for all Romans to go get hot and fast food. Okay. So that is, let me go back. That is it for the lesson. Now we can move on to the final 4 aspects of life in the Roman Empire.